Well, you've probably heard the phrase, easy come, easy go, right? Well, today we're diving deep into £1,000,000 that never actually came, all thanks to a cough, a single cough that kicked off, honestly, one of the most bizarre and sensational criminal trials in UK history.
Yeah, quite a story.
We are, of course, talking about Major Charles Ingram, his incredibly infamous appearance on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and the forensic investigation that followed what looked like a near-perfect crime playing out live on national TV.
It really is an extraordinary story, mostly because the stakes were just so genuinely life-changing. I mean, we're talking about £1,000,000 sterling back in 2001.
Which is huge money today, let alone then.
Absolutely. It's equivalent to almost, 2.3 million today. And the show itself, Millionaire, the sheer drama of it, just 15 questions standing between you and total financial freedom. It creates this unique psychological pressure cooker.
Oh, definitely.
The whole structure, it's designed specifically to test not just what you know, but your nerve, your psychology under pressure.
Exactly right. I mean, the format itself is just a masterclass in psychological design, isn't it? You got those three lifelines, 50-50, phone a friend, ask the audience. They're resources, sure, but using them, it's also sort of an admission of weakness, or at least doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the safety nets. Those are critical. £1,000 at question 5, which is, achievable for most.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's that crucial £32,000 safety net at question 10.
That's the big one.
Yeah, because anything above that 10th question, you're in really high-risk, high-reward territory. Any mistake means you plummet right back down to £32,000. It's this structure, this jeopardy, that makes Ingram's whole journey so incredible and, ultimately so suspicious.
And stepping right into that pressure cooker is Charles William Ingram. Now, professionally, he seemed like a very disciplined kind of guy. He was a major in the British Army's Royal Engineers, commissioned back in 1987, promoted to major in 95. And he wasn't just military. He had degrees in civil engineering and corporate management. So, technical knowledge, management skills.
You'd sort of expect him to be methodical, calculated, maybe even a bit immune to simple stage fright, wouldn't you?
You would think so. But the sources, they make it really clear that the pressure of this specific show wasn't actually new to his family. And this is, I think, crucial context we need to establish right up front.
Okay.
Charles Ingram was basically part of a quiz show dynasty, almost. His wife, Diana, and her brother, Adrian Pollock, they were already seasoned Millionaire veterans.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, both of them had previously been on the show and won £32,000 each. They'd reached that key safety net.
Wow. So they knew the game inside out.
Exactly. They weren't just casual fans watching at home. They were deeply, almost you could say obsessively, embedded in the whole world of quizzing and TV game shows. They understood the mechanics, the types of questions, and crucially, how vital it was to win that fastest finger first round just to get into the hot seat.
Right. You've got to get past that first hurdle.
And Charles, it seems he sort of adopted this family tradition, this obsession. He prepared with, almost military precision.
Fitting.
Yeah. Our sources say he took preparation incredibly seriously. He went so far as to practice on a homemade fastest finger first machine. Apparently, he did this for 20 minutes every single day.
20 minutes a day? Wow.
Yeah, he wasn't just relying on luck or general knowledge. He was aiming to master the specific timing, the reflexes needed just to qualify for the main game.
Okay, so he's putting in the work.
He really is. And that preparation, it finally paid off on September 9th, 2001. Ingram wins the fastest finger first round. He gets his spot. He's in the hot seat.
Okay, the culmination of all that practice.
Exactly. But what followed, it was arguably one of the most confusing, kind of lackluster performances ever seen by someone supposedly aiming for the top prize.
Right. It was almost anticlimactic, wasn't it? The major who trained 20 minutes a day for months. He just looked utterly lost up there. The production team's notes describe his initial performance as extremely nervous, uncertain, completely lacking the composure you'd expect.
Yeah, not what you'd think from a trained officer or someone with his background or even just someone who'd practiced that much.
Totally. And the best way to illustrate this, I think, is how quickly he just burned through his lifelines. On a question about, get this, Audrey Roberts' daughter's name in the soap opera Coronation Street.
Which is, let's be honest, pretty basic general knowledge for a UK audience at that time.
Absolutely. He struggled so badly he had to use his Ask the Audience lifeline.
Wow.
And even then, even with 89% of the audience voting for the right answer, Gail, she still paused, he debated it, showing this incredible lack of trust either in common knowledge or just the mechanism of the show itself. I mean, if you're a serious quizzer, that level of doubt on a basic question like that is, well, it's alarming.
It really is. And it actually gets worse. Shortly after that, he gets to the 4,000-pound question. It was about which river flows through Derry, or Londonderry, the River Foyle.
Okay, simple enough UK geography.
You'd think so. He had to use his phone-a-friend lifeline.
Seriously, on that.
Yeah. So by the end of his first day, his first recording session, he had somehow scraped through to 4,000 pounds, but he'd burned through 2 of his 3 vital lifelines. All he had left was the 50-50.
Okay, so things are looking pretty grim for the Major at this point.
Completely. The production team, according to the sources, they essentially wrote him off. Their collective assessment was just. He's not going much further. He was clearly flustered, seemed poorly prepared on general knowledge, and had almost no lifelines left.
So this sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? The lowest possible expectations from the audience, from the crew.
Yeah.
Which makes what happens next even more shocking.
Exactly. They just expected him to probably lose the next question, take his 4,000 pounds, shake Chris Tarrant's hand, and go home. That failure narrative makes the events of the next day, the quote-unquote impossible turnaround, so incredibly jarring.
Right. So when Charles Ingram comes back on September 10th for the second day of filming, the nervous, bumbling Major we saw before, he's just gone.
Yeah.
The transition was immediate, and it was dramatically different. He steps onto the stage for day 2, seemingly armed not just with, well, not knowledge, but with an entirely new, almost brazenly risky strategy.
And the change wasn't subtle at all. It was obvious in his whole demeanor and, crucially, in the way he started answering the questions. He began playing this a highly unusual manner, taking these huge risks that, based on what we saw the day before, his knowledge base simply didn't seem to justify.
And he adopted this weird technique, didn't he,
Yeah.
of delaying his answers, like, excessively.
Yeah, that was really noticeable. He'd repeat all 4 options out loud, sometimes 2 or 3 times over. And he'd often debate internally, sometimes even arguing vehemently against the correct answer, before making the sudden, baffling pivot right at the last second to the right choice.
It looks so erratic, but weirdly effective.
Exactly. Now, the defense, later on at the trial, they tried to explain this away. They claimed this intentional delay, this sort of verbal wrestling with the choices, was purely for show effect. You know, a tactic to build suspense for the cameras, for the folks watching at home.
Right, playing it up for TV.
But to the crew actually watching him live in the studio, it just looked like he was waiting for something.
And the most pivotal moment, the real turning point for this new strategy, came at question 10, didn't it? The 32,000-pound safety net question.
Yes. This was the big one, the question that would lock in the minimum prize he could take home no matter what happened after. The question was, who had a hit UK album with Born to Do It released in 2000?
Okay, pop music question.
The options were Coldplay, Top Loader, A1, and Craig David. Now, Ingram immediately says he thinks it's A1, and he notes with almost comical certainty that he had never heard of Craig David.
Never heard of Craig David in 2001. That's quite a statement. He was huge then.
Exactly. A pretty significant cultural blind spot for someone competing for £1 million, you'd think. Anyway, he still had that one lifeline left, the 50-50. And he uses it.
Okay. So the computer takes away 2 wrong answers.
Right. It eliminates Coldplay and Top Loader, leaving him with A1, the one he thought he knew, and Craig David, the one he claimed he'd never heard of.
The choice seems obvious based on what he said. Go with A1.
You'd think. But then we see the pivot, that moment of sort of anti-intuition that just defies all standard quiz logic.
Yeah.
He spends several really painful seconds debating, clearly leaning towards A1, the band he thinks he knows.
Yeah.
Then, almost in a whisper, he sums it up like this. You know what? 80% of the time I'm wrong when I guess, so I will go with Craig David.
Wait, why? He picked the answer he didn't know based on distrusting his own guesses?
Precisely. Not based on knowledge, not based on a hunch, but based purely on a self-diagnosed failure rate. Yeah. He locks it in. And of course, it's correct. Craig David, he's secured the 32,000-pound safety net.
Wow. Okay, I can see why that would raise eyebrows.
Absolutely. This is the point where, for the production team, those internal alarm bells really escalated from sort of mild curiosity to outright suspicion.
Right.
Rod Taylor, one of the executive producers, he captured this feeling perfectly. He said later that Ingram wasn't under the pressure that he should have been somehow. He should have been cautious, calculated, especially after using his last lifeline. Instead, he was erratic, but highly confident in his erraticism.
His playing style just didn't match his apparent knowledge level at all.
Not even close. And the brazen risks just kept coming, getting bigger and bigger. Moving up the ladder now. Question 13. This is for the £500,000 mark. Baron Haussmann is best known for his planning of which city? Options were Rome, Paris, Berlin, and Athens.
Okay, history, geography. What did he do this time?
Same pattern. Starts with misdirection. He initially assumes Berlin, actually stating out loud, Haussmann sounds German. He argues this point for quite a while, debating whether a French name could sound German.
Even though the correct answer, Paris, is famously known for its Haussmann-designed boulevards.
Exactly. It's quite well known. So again, he debates, he delays, talks himself away from the right answer. And then, after what must have seemed like an eternity to everyone watching, he makes the pivot, lands on Paris.
And gets it right again, secures £500,000.
£500,000 guaranteed. He's now only one single question away from the ultimate prize. And Chris Tarrant, the host, noted something interesting here. He said that where most contestants at this stage would be visibly panicked, sweating, shaking, Ingram just calmly said, yes, come on, let's play.
Wow, just ready to risk £218,000. 500K, 288K loss. 212K. No, 532K equals 468K. Wait, the risk is losing the difference between 500K and 32K. So 468K. The outline says 218K. Let me reread the outline. Wait, 500K is not a safety net. The 32K is the safety net. So going from 500K to the million means risking losing 468K to go back to 32K. The outline mentioning 218K seems wrong or maybe relates to a previous question increment. I'll stick to the core logic, risking 468K. He was ready to risk nearly £500,000 to move on, suggesting this level of certainty that his earlier behavior just didn't warrant at all.
Exactly. It just didn't add up. And this brings us to it, the final iconic question, the £1,000,000 question. And it requires knowledge not of history or pop culture, but pure mathematics, scientific terminology.
Okay, what was it?
A number 1 followed by 100 zeros is known by what name?
I know this one.
Options were Google, Megatron, Gigabit, Manimal.
Right. And what did Ingram do? Let me guess. Claimed ignorance.
Bingo. Just like with Craig David, he explicitly tells Tarrant he does not know what a Google is. He openly leans towards Nanimal. He even states clearly that he thinks he's going to fail the question, telling Tarrant he'd originally planned to just walk away at £32,000.
But he didn't walk away.
Nope. Instead, that strange deliberation process starts all over again. He starts eliminating the options out loud. I don't think it's Gigabit. I don't think it's Nanimal. Don't think it's Megatron.
Leading him only to.
So it must be Google. He chooses the one term he openly admitted moments before that he had never heard of, relying purely on this process of elimination that, given his struggles with basic knowledge earlier, just seemed impossibly sharp, impossibly convenient.
And he chooses Google. And he wins. £1 million.
£1 million. He becomes only the third contestant ever at that time to do so.
It's just an unbelievable arc, isn't it? From struggling with soap opera questions on day 1 to suddenly mastering the elimination process on obscure scientific terms on day 2. It was erratic, definitely non-standard, but ultimately incredibly successful.
Yeah, a truly bizarre performance. But that success, that £1 million win, it lasted only as long as the cameras were actually rolling.
Right, because the immediate fallout was incredibly swift.
Yeah, the sources confirm that Celador, the production company behind Millionaire, they immediately suspended the £1 million payout. They cited suspected irregularities observed during the gameplay itself.
So they were suspicious right away.
Oh, yeah. But the behavioral evidence, the thing that really seemed to seal the team's suspicion, happened moments later, off camera, back in the dressing room.
The argument.
Exactly. Instead of this atmosphere of pure euphoria and celebration, which, you'd absolutely expect from anyone who just won a life-changing sum of money, right?
Absolutely. Champagne popping, tears of joy.
None of that. Reportedly, the atmosphere was toxic. Chris Tarrant and other production staff actually overheard Charles and his wife Diana arguing fiercely in their dressing room. This was literally seconds before Tarrant was supposed to go in and join them for the traditional celebratory champagne.
And the quotes that were overheard are pretty damning, aren't they?
Very. Diana was allegedly heard saying something like, "No one is ever going to believe it. You are mad." Which strongly suggests they weren't arguing about the joy of winning, but about the way the win was achieved.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a happy couple. And wasn't there something about a staff member being told off?
Yes. Apparently, Eve, a member of the research staff, approached the dressing room with the champagne bottle, ready for the photo op, and was reportedly told very forcibly to get out of his dressing room and F off.
Charming.
Tarrant reflected on it later. He said, look, regardless of any personal marital issues you might have, if you've just won £1 million, you should be hugging your wife and cracking open that bottle, not having a furious shouting match.
Good point. So the production team now has the visual evidence of the bizarre gameplay, and they have this behavioral evidence of the post-game argument.
Right. So the investigation, which had maybe started as just a mild suspicion, a sort of that was weird feeling, it turned into a full-blown review pretty quickly. They started reviewing the tapes of the show, but with one crucial difference this time.
They turned up the volume.
Essentially, yes. They started amplifying the audio tracks, listening really closely.
And this is where the whole story just pivots completely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From suspicion based on what they saw to what they believed was concrete proof based on what they heard.
Exactly. The sources detail how the production team sat through hours and hours of tape recordings. Apparently, the main producer went home that night feeling great. You know, we've got another millionaire. But several others on the team stayed late, trying to figure out what felt so wrong about Ingram's performance.
They knew something was off, but couldn't pinpoint it.
Not at first. They couldn't spot anything definitive on the first pass. It wasn't until they were reviewing it all for a second time, really late that night, the source says specifically around 1:45 a.m., that a young editor finally noticed it. He apparently said, hang on, there's a cough.
Wow, 1.45 in the morning.
And once they started listening for coughs, they suddenly realized that Ingram's final answers, especially those moments where he pivoted unexpectedly, coincided precisely with audible coughs.
Not just any coughs, though. Coming from somewhere specific.
Exactly. They notice a distinct pattern of noise coming specifically from the fastest finger-first contestant area. That's where the other contestants who are waiting for their turn sit, just off stage.
Okay.
And the primary source of this suspicious coughing was identified as Tequin Whittock, a Welsh college lecturer, and, interestingly, another serial quiz show contestant who was waiting his turn right there.
Tequin Whittock. The coughing major wasn't the only one coughing.
Not according to the prosecution, though it wasn't exclusively Whittock either. For one specific question, the audible cough that seemed to signal the correct answer was identified as coming from Diana Ingram herself, who was sitting out in the audience.
So his wife was in on it too. That's the allegation.
That was the allegation. The implication was clear. This was a three-person conspiracy. Charles playing the game, Diana in the audience, and Tequin in the contestant pod, all somehow coordinating signals through coughs.
Good grief. So what was the actual charge they faced?
The official charge leveled against all three, Charles Ingram, Diana Ingram, and Tequin Whittock, was procuring the execution of a valuable security by deception.
Okay, that sounds legally complicated. Can you break that down?
Yeah, it's interesting phrasing, isn't it? It's not just simple fraud. Procuring the execution basically means causing the transfer of something valuable. In this case, the prize money, the £1 million check or bank transfer, that constitutes a valuable security.
Right, the money itself.
Yes, because it's a legally enforceable right to that money.
Yeah.
And they were accused of obtaining it, procuring its execution, its handover, through a dishonest act, the deception, the alleged systematic cheating using coughs.
So they were accused of cheating to force Celador to hand over the £1 million.
That's the essence of it. And the statistics presented at the trial, they were really designed to show that this pattern of coughs couldn't possibly be just a coincidence.
Okay, what were the numbers?
During Ingram's Day 2 performance, the prosecution said 192 coughs were recorded in total across the entire studio environment. Now, they claim that 32 of those 192 coughs originated specifically from the fastest finger-first contestant box where Whittock was sitting.
Okay, 32 coughs from that area.
But here's the crucial bit. They allege that 19 of those 32 were significant coughs. Significant because they aligned precisely with Ingram speaking the correct answer out loud, often just milliseconds before he locked it in.
19 times.
Yeah.
That does sound unlikely to be random.
That was certainly the prosecution's argument. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the integrity of the evidence itself becomes really, really contentious.
How so?
Because the version of the video and audio that was actually played to the jury in court, it wasn't the raw, unedited recording from the studio.
Ah.
It was a version specifically prepared by Celador's own editors, a company called EditWorks. And the source material highlights that this version had the coughing sounds significantly amplified relative to all the other sounds in the studio.
Amplified, like turned up louder than everything else.
Exactly. Louder than Ingram's own voice, louder than Chris Tarrant's voice, louder than the audience applause or murmurs.
Okay, that feels potentially problematic.
It's a massive distinction, isn't it? If you enhance a faint noise in post-production to make it audible, you could argue you're just clarifying existing evidence. But the defense argued that by deliberately amplifying only certain sounds, certain frequencies, and suppressing others, basically, manipulating the relative volume levels, Celador wasn't just finding the evidence, they were effectively curating it, maybe even creating it, to fit a narrative of guilt that they already suspected.
They were potentially making faint background coughs sound like deliberate, loud signals.
That was the defense's claim. And crucially, Chris Tarrant himself, the host, the man whose job it was to literally observe the whole scene, stand right next to Ingram, moderate the flow, he later insisted, quite strongly, that he heard absolutely nothing suspicious during the actual recording.
You didn't hear the coughs.
He said he was simply too busy running the show, focusing on Ingram, the questions, the pace, to notice anything out of the ordinary in the ambient noise at the time. Which begs the question. If the host, standing maybe 3 feet away, didn't hear these supposedly significant coughs live, how loud could they have actually been before the audio was amplified?
That's a really good point. So the audible evidence, the core of the prosecution's case, was entirely reliant on this late-night post-production review and the technical amplification, not on anyone's live perception in the studio.
Pretty much. And this whole debate over the audio really set the stage for the courtroom drama, where a jury ultimately had to decide if they trusted their own ears listening to what was arguably a manufactured soundscape.
Which takes us right into part 4, the trial itself. A sensational 4-week trial at Southwark Crown Court, where the defense and prosecution battled over intent, coincidence, and the very physics of sound.
And despite the evidence being purely circumstantial, essentially a pattern of amplified sound matched with a change in behavior, no smoking gun, no confession. The jury, after deliberating for 3.5 days, returned a majority verdict. Guilty. For all 3 defendants, Charles, Diana, and Tequin Whittock. This was on April 7th, 2003.
Guilty. Wow. So what was the sentence?
Well, the immediate sentencing was actually suspended prison terms for all 3. The Ingrams got 18 months suspended for 2 years, and Whittock got 12 months suspended for 2 years. But the real punishment, perhaps beyond the massive loss of reputation, was financial.
The costs.
Exactly. They were each fined £15,000 initially, and then ordered to pay £10,000 towards prosecution costs. But those costs just kept mounting, and eventually totaled a crushing £115,000 in legal costs for the Ingrams alone. Plus, of course, they never saw a penny of the £1 million.
Ouch. Financially ruinous. Now, the most compelling part of the trial, for me anyway, and frankly the most bizarre, involved the testimony of Tequin Whittock, the alleged cougher himself.
Oh, absolutely. He was a Welsh college lecturer, remember? And his defense was, on the surface, quite simple. He suffered from a chronic, persistent, lifelong cough.
A lifelong cough.
That was his claim. He said it was exacerbated by hay fever and a dust allergy, which the studio environment could potentially trigger. So, he argued, the entire pattern of him coughing at seemingly opportune moments was just a tragic, if highly improbable coincidence, a medical issue, not a signal.
Okay, that sounds like a potentially solid defense,
right?
A legitimate medical problem. But the prosecution found a way to undermine that, didn't they?
They did, quite spectacularly. They pointed out a stunning contradiction that really cast doubt on his whole story.
What was it?
Well, when Whittock himself later got his chance in the hot seat as a contestant on the show, because he did eventually get to play.
Oh, he actually played?
Yes. And when he was up there, under the lights, playing for the money himself, his persistent, lifelong throat problems, they suddenly completely vanished. He was filmed on stage, observed by everyone, and he was perfectly fine. No coughing fits.
Oh, that doesn't look good. What was his explanation for that?
Whittock's explanation was simply that he'd drunk several glasses of water just before going on stage, which he claimed helped manage the condition.
Right. And I guess this detail becomes a sort of litmus test for anyone looking at the case, doesn't it? Do you believe that explanation, that water was enough to completely stop a lifelong chronic cough triggered by allergies and dust right when he needed it to stop? Does that sound legitimate? Or does it sound like a really convenient excuse, suggesting he only coughed when he needed to signal an answer to Ingram?
It's definitely a point that makes you pause. And the prosecution piled on more. They introduced evidence suggesting Whittock wasn't just passively sitting there coughing. He might have been actively trying to find the answers for Ingram. They found a handwritten general knowledge notebook at his home.
Okay. Lots of quizzers keep notes.
True. But inside this notebook, specifically written down, was the answer to the 12th question. Ingram faced the one about the painter of the painting, The Ambassadors.
So he had the answer written down at home. That suggests he was preparing, but was he preparing to cheat or just preparing for his own eventual turn in the hot seat? It's still ambiguous.
It is ambiguous. But then there was the testimony of the floor manager, a guy named Davies. He added to the suspicion regarding Whittock's actual physical actions while coughing.
What did he say he saw?
Davies testified that when he started noticing the coughing from the contestant pod, he specifically watched Whittock. He said Whittock would sometimes turn and speak briefly to the person next to him, but then, in what Davies described as a very noticeable and strange movement, he would turn his body towards the main set, towards the hot seat where Ingram was sitting, just before he coughed.
Ah, turning towards Ingram to cough. That implies directionality, aiming the cough.
That was the implication the prosecution wanted the jury to draw. Now, Whittock countered this in court with a pretty common-sense defense. You do not cough into someone's face. He implied he was simply turning away from his neighbor to be polite when he coughed.
Okay, plausible deniability again.
Exactly, but the prosecution framed it as turning towards the target. Adding to the ambiguity, Whittock also tried to paint himself as an unlikely criminal mastermind by highlighting his rather poor history as a quiz show contestant. He called himself a serial quiz show loser.
Really?
Yeah. He'd apparently failed quite badly on 15-1, lost on the People Versus, and the grand total of his winnings on Sale of the Century was just a cheap atlas. His argument was basically, how could this lifelong quiz show mediocrity suddenly orchestrate such a sophisticated, high-stakes criminal conspiracy?
The I'm too incompetent to be guilty defense.
Sort of, yeah. The jury clearly didn't buy that underdog story in the end, but the defense team overall kept hammering away at the fundamental premise that the audible evidence, the cough tape, was flawed, manipulated, and simply unrepresentative of what actually happened in the studio. Ingram himself testified, claiming the amplified videotape was unfairly manipulated and insisting he never listened for, encouraged, nor noticed any coughing.
He just played his game, however erratically.
That was his story. And this whole point about potentially manipulated evidence, it actually gained some serious traction outside the courtroom later on. A well-known journalist, John Ronson, who covered the trial really extensively.
Oh yeah, I know his work.
Ronson initially believed Ingram was guilty, like many people. But he later changed his mind, partly based on a fascinating human detail he observed during the trial itself. He noted that whenever the word cough was mentioned out loud in court, other attendees in the public gallery, particularly some elderly pensioners who were just watching the proceedings, would involuntarily start to cough themselves.
Just hearing the word made them cough.
Apparently so. Which really suggests that coughing can be easily triggered by simple suggestion, not just by a physical need or a deliberate signal.
That's fascinating. And it ties into another argument, doesn't it? From that chess grandmaster.
Yes, exactly. James Plaskett. He was a chess grandmaster, but also a keen quiz enthusiast who had actually been a contestant on Millionaire himself. He argued that the coughs, even if they did coincide with the right answers, could have been entirely involuntary.
How so?
He suggested they could be triggered by unconscious suggestion. So picture this. Whittock, sitting there, hearing Ingram say the correct answer out loud. Whittock knows it's the right answer, maybe he's been thinking about it, and upon hearing it confirmed, he experiences this tiny, physical, auditory tick, a cough. It's a spontaneous reaction, Plaskett argued, not a deliberate signal, like your body just reacting unconsciously.
So the trial basically boiled down to this incredibly compelling debate, didn't it? Was this a highly deliberate, organized criminal signaling system using coughs, or was it just a naturally occurring, maybe slightly unusual, acoustic pattern of background noise and involuntary killix, which was then manufactured, amplified, and given sinister significance by a suspicious production team after the fact?
That's the absolute crux of it. And regardless of where the actual truth lies, the conviction itself had immediate and absolutely crushing consequences for Major Ingram, leading to the complete destruction of his professional life and reputation.
Right. Almost immediately after the conviction, things moved fast with the military.
Yeah, within just a few months, on August 19th, 2003, Charles Ingram was formally ordered by the Army Board to resign his commission as a major. That was after 16 years of service. His military career was just over.
Though they didn't take his pension, did they?
No, the sources are careful to note that. His pension entitlements weren't affected by the guilty verdict, but his active career was finished.
Still, a huge blow. And the public infamy, the mounting legal costs.
Yeah,
It just kept grinding them down financially.
Absolutely. Losing the potential £1 million was just the start. Years of appeals, accumulating fines, those huge prosecution costs. It was devastating.
And incredibly, the troubles didn't even stop with the quiz show scandal, did it? There was another legal battle soon after.
That's right. In late 2003, Ingram found himself facing an entirely separate legal fight, an insurance fraud case, this time at Bournemouth Crown Court.
Insurance fraud. What was that about?
It really illustrates how the sheer high-profile nature of the Millionaire scandal created this massive sort of snowball effect in his life. It brought intense scrutiny onto basically every one of his past dealings.
So what was the specific charge?
He was found guilty of obtaining a pecuniary advantage by deception, similar language to the Millionaire charge. This related to him failing to disclose his history of being a habitual claimant when he took out an insurance policy with Direct Line Insurance back in 2001.
A habitual claimant?
Yeah.
Meaning he'd made lots of previous insurance claims.
Apparently so, which he hadn't declared on his application. And here's the direct connection point. The staff at Direct Line only even started investigating his later £30,000 burglary claim after they read all the sensational media coverage about the Millionaire cheating case.
Wow. So his public notoriety directly triggered that investigation.
It seems so. His public profile became the trigger for much deeper financial scrutiny. Interestingly, the judge in that insurance case actually acknowledged the extraordinary amount of public humiliation and financial ruin Ingram had already suffered because of the Millionaire scandal.
So he gave him leniency.
He gave Ingram a conditional discharge. He specifically refused to impose community service after Ingram apparently expressed genuine fear of being bullied by other criminals because he was so recognizable, noting his already dire financial state.
Good grief. What a mess. So after his military career ended and these legal defeats, what did he do?
Well, Charles Ingram actually turned to writing. Perhaps, seeking an outlet for the incredibly complex drama he'd just lived through. He published 2 novels, The Network in 2006 and Deep Siege in 2007.
And didn't they sort of lean into the notoriety for a while on TV?
They did, rather bizarrely perhaps. They became these minor celebrities of scandal. They actually appeared on other television programs, including, ironically, The Weakest Link.
Oh, Ann Robinson must have had a field day.
You bet. The host, Ann Robinson, couldn't resist joking about the dashing young major with a throat infection. They also appeared on the reality show Wife Swap at one point.
Wow, just embracing the infamy.
It seemed that way for a while, and as if their story wasn't already strange enough, there was that completely unrelated, almost surreal incident in 2010.
Oh yeah, the lawnmower thing?
It's a lawnmower thing. The major suffered this bizarre physical injury, losing 3 toes on his left foot in a lawnmower accident. It just seems his run of bad luck and frankly bizarre headline-grabbing incidents was just unrelenting for a time.
Unbelievable. So what are they doing now? Have things calmed down?
It seems so. Today, the Ingrams are reportedly living a much quieter life. They rent an annex attached to an old 18th century farmhouse on a country estate somewhere. Diana runs her own jewelry business, apparently specializing in Murano glass items. She sells them online and at pop-up craft shops. It's a very long way from the glamorous, high-pressure studio lights of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
A much quieter existence. But despite their attempt to move on, the controversy itself, the story, it just refuses to die, doesn't it?
Not at all. It keeps resonating. The story was famously immortalized, as many people will know, in the really popular 2020 ITV drama series Quiz.
Right, with Michael Sheen as Chris Tarrant. Great show.
Fantastic show, and it was based on the stage play by James Graham. Importantly, Quiz deliberately chose to present more of the defense's perspective, really allowing viewers to grapple with the ambiguity of it all, the possibility of their innocence.
Yeah, definitely made you think twice.
And the actual legal fight has never completely stopped either. In 2020, a human rights lawyer named Rona Friedman took on the case. She's actively seeking to overturn the original 2003 convictions.
Really? On what grounds?
Friedman essentially argues that Charles Ingram is just an intense, highly emotional, maybe somewhat unusual man whose wild and eccentric character was simply mistaken for suspicious criminal behavior by a production team that was already primed to find a conspiracy.
So back to the idea that his personality was misinterpreted.
Partly. But the new appeal is primarily based on challenging the very foundation of the prosecution's case, the integrity of that audio evidence.
Ah, the amplified coughs again.
Exactly. Friedman is pushing for the application of new, modern audio analysis technology. The argument is that this tech could potentially better identify and separate individual coughs within the complex soundscape of the studio recording, which could severely question the integrity, or at least the interpretation, of the original audio evidence presented to the jury back in 2003.
So science might finally give a clearer answer.
That's the hope of the appeal. The focus is squarely on the fact that the original audio was prepared and amplified by the prosecutor, by Celador, the production company, who were effectively the victim and prosecutor without independent, objective verification at the time. Friedman claims there are inconsistencies and even gaps in the chain of continuity of the evidence tapes, suggesting the version the jury heard might have been deliberately curated to emphasize guilt.
It really highlights that core paradox of the defense's argument, doesn't it? If Ingram was guilty, if he was this meticulous cheat who practiced fastest finger first with military precision,
Right.
why on earth would he select as his accomplice, his signalman, Tequin Whittock, the
Yeah.
one guy in the room known to have a chronic, persistent cough that's aggravated by allergies and dust?
It's either the stupidest choice or the cleverest, isn't it?
Exactly. It creates this perfect scenario for plausible deniability. If he's innocent, well, Whittock coughs all the time. There's this background noise magnified by suspicion. If he's guilty, it's actually a stroke of genius pick. The only person whose constant chronic coughing would likely be present anyway, and therefore potentially explainable, regardless of whether they were signaling or not.
It's deeply ambiguous. Ultimately, the source material shows that the Ingram's current legal team is trying to prove that the initial suspicion, which was based purely on Ingram's unusual gameplay, and maybe that dressing room argument, led to a fundamentally flawed investigation where the audio evidence was then retroactively curated, amplified, and interpreted specifically to confirm that pre-existing bias.
This whole case is just a perfect, maybe terrifying illustration of how technology, in this case, audio recording and editing, can both reveal potential truths and potentially distort them, depending on how it's used and interpreted.
Absolutely. The recording revealed a pattern, arguably. But did the editing then manufacture the criminal intent behind that pattern? That's the million-pound question that still lingers.
So when we try to wrap our heads around this, what does it all mean for us, for you listening, as we look back on this incredible saga? What we have is a seemingly impossible win, achieved through gameplay that was, let's face it, utterly erratic and non-standard.
Followed immediately by that intense, suspicious argument in the dressing room.
Then we have those 19 supposedly critical coughs, isolated and amplified from nearly 200 general background sounds in the studio.
Resulting in a legal conviction based almost entirely on audio evidence whose fundamental integrity is now being subjected to modern scientific scrutiny over 2 decades later.
The central tension, it seems, will forever be this clash, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
Between the objective question, did the sounds actually guide the major's answers? And the much more subjective perception of guilt that was undeniably fueled by his bizarre behavior on screen and then massively reinforced by the amplified soundscape presented in court.
It's a drama that just keeps unfolding, even after all this time.
It really does. And we want to leave you with one final thought today, drawn directly from the source material regarding that late-night investigation by the production team right after the filming stopped. Remember that detail. The show's producer went home on a high, but several of the production team sat through the tapes later that night trying to find out what had happened. But they could spot nothing.
Nothing on the first pass.
Nothing. It was only when they were viewing it all for a second time at about 1:45 in the morning that a young editor said, hang on, there's a cough.
That specific moment, deep in the early hours, after potentially hours of fruitlessly searching for proof of a crime they already suspected had happened, that's when the crucial evidence was allegedly found.
Which raises, I think, a really chilling question for you to mull over as you think about the nature of evidence, proof, and truth. Was the truth about the coughing conspiracy actually found during that late-night review? Or was it perhaps somehow created in that specific moment of hyper-focused attention, confirmation bias, and amplified sound based entirely on the initial deep suspicion already planted by the major's radically unusual gameplay?
Did the investigation begin with an open-minded search for justice, or did it become, perhaps unconsciously, simply a search for confirmation of what they already believed must have happened?
It's the difference between objectively hearing a pattern and perhaps desperately needing to create one to explain the inexplicable.
And that difference, in this case, was worth £1 million, or maybe nearly 2.3 million in today's money.
Thanks for diving deep with us on this one. We'll see you next time.